The Krasnogorsk 3 here is going to be pressed into service again very soon, and in order to use it, it needs to be loaded with film. So I thought I'd show you some of the process. I'm Drew Silver, and this is Fenland on Film. Now, the manufacturer states that this particular film can be loaded in subdued lighting, which this more or less is. I like to go a step further and make it darker still. So I'm going to switch off these lights here. So you probably won't be able to see me now, but in a moment you're going to join me at the table with a top-down view and in night vision. So you'll be able to see exactly what I'm doing. Right, I've got the essentials all laid out ready, so let's get started. I'm going to take the cover off and just pop that to one side, out of the way. And now you can see the inner workings of the K3. I'm just going to take out the take-up spool so you can see a bit better. This space here will be occupied by what I call the feeder spool, which is in this light tight box at present. The film will be partially unwound, fed through the mechanism here. I will form an upper loop, feed the film past the film gate. I will create a lower loop. The film will then be fed back through the mechanism here on the opposite side, and then it will make its way to the take-up spool. Right, so let's open this box. There we go. So that there, as you can see, looks identical to that, except this one is empty, it's been used, and this one is full of lovely unexposed 16mm Kodak film. So very carefully just pull that out of the retainer, and it's got a little band on it to help it all stay together, so I'll just gingerly take that off because we don't want the whole thing unraveling. That would be catastrophic. And saying that, it is actually stuck down with a sticky label, so we'll just undo that. That will be discarded. So you see how easily and how quickly this starts unraveling once you undo that. So very briefly show you the strip of film. The lighter side is the light sensitive film emulsion. So that is where the picture is going to be captured. And the darker side is simply the film backing. So once this is processed, it will create a kind of a semi-transparent piece of film that you can then shine light through and replicate an image. So this goes into here. So this is this needle, I suppose, is actually the film counter. So it presses up against the unused film, and there's a dial on the back controlled by this needle, and it tells me how much film is left to use. So I just push that out of the way, and then that sits in there very gracefully this time. It didn't last time. And that's all nicely on there. I'm just going to pull some film off to work with. And we're going to feed it through that top part of the mechanism. And as it's popped in there, it should catch. You can probably see and hear that that is actually locked. Now before I create the upper loop of the film, I'm just going to take the pressure plate away from the gate. I'll do that slowly so you can see it, and pop that to one side. I'm going to take my air blower and just blow some air into that particular area, so that if there is any debris, be it dust or erroneous film emulsion or hairs or anything, that will have hopefully dislodged it. Now taking the film and creating the upper loop, and at the same time feeding it through the film gate. So two things need to happen here. I need to make sure that the upper loop is the right size, that it's not too big and not too small. But I also need to make sure that the film engages with the pull down claw, which is what helps the film transit at a specific rate past the film gate, so that we don't end up with any blurry images. I'm going to make sure that the film is locked on the pull down claw, which it is. I'm just going to pop the pressure plate back into position. It should lock. Hopefully I'll get an audible click. There we go. So that's in there nicely. That's now holding the film flush against the gate. Now another thing I need to do is just take up the slack ever so slightly, and I'm going to put a little bit of wind, just a touch, and I'm going to run through a little bit of film. And what I need to observe is that the upper loop has not changed size, and it hasn't, which is great. So I now need to create the lower loop. There is a little clasp there that just wants to be popped out of the way ever so slightly. This will then open up and the film will just slide into the gap. Just make sure that that grabs, and then I can close that. Make sure that it locks. Give it another pull, that's not moving. And then just make sure that that clasp is shut. And so that will keep that all in there nicely. So you can see now I've got the upper loop just here, got the lower loop. That all looks good to me. And then this part of the film here will get wound onto the take-up spool. I'm just going to run a little bit more film off at this stage, and just observe that that is all still working correctly, which it is. And there's a little recess in there which I'll just keep my finger next to so I know where it is. And then the film gets threaded until it meets resistance, basically, which is about there. And then keeping it nice and tight, winding it onto the reel, maintaining the pressure so that it doesn't unravel, and then that is just going to sit in there, and that wants to be tight but not too tight. That looks good to me. So once again, I'm just going to lift this up, tilt it slightly, dislodge anything that I may have just introduced into the space. It's probably a bit overkill, but I'd like to do it as thoroughly as possible. And trying not to kind of move my hands over it too much. Just go put a little bit more wind on there. Push the trigger. That looks great. So the thing that I was looking for there is that the upper loop has not changed size. The lower loop has not changed size. I'm just going to check the take-up spool, make sure that is still tight, and check the feeder spool, and that is still tight as well. So that all looked good. I have every confidence that will work as intended during filming. So without leaving the case open for too long, I'm going to replace the cover. There we go, and that locks simply like so. So that is loaded and ready for use, except this particular camera is notorious for light leaks, and it's this part here which is the most prolific cause of light leaks, where the lid meets the camera body. There's not enough of a lip to sufficiently seal it from stray light. Light can also enter in an unintended way through the lens, so it's good practice to keep the lens cap on for for the duration that you're not filming, basically. Light can also enter through the eyepiece, the viewfinder, so it's also good practice to keep that covered up when you're not actively filming. But this here is the main concern, so that area will need to be taped up to minimize any potential light leaks. And I do so with electrical tape. I've run out of the black stuff, so you won't be able to see this on camera at the moment, but this here is blue electrical tape. But it's good enough. It'll do the job. There we go, that looks good. And the other bit that needs to be taped is the lock. Now, there are two reasons I do that. One is because it is a potential area for a light leak, but two, it minimizes the risk of the case being opened unintentionally. That is the K3 loaded. So I can now bring the lights back up. So that's all nicely loaded. You can see it in better lighting now. I like to give the camera a bit of a wipe over with a microfiber cloth and some lighter fluid. It just brings the camera up nicely and makes it look quite presentable. Some of that tape already starting to peel. I might just put a bit more. It's not particularly good tape, actually. There we go. That should do the job. What I like to do as well, if I just pop the camera there and take the lens cap off. There we go. And just take the glass cleaning cloth, few drops of lighter fluid and just very gently clean that lens. The lovely thing about lighter fluid is that it just evaporates, leaves a very nice, clean, residue-free surface. What I will do is just pop these bits away because they'll be needed later. So once the film has run through and is fully exposed, it will go back in this light tight box, and then off it will go to Kodak for development. But there we go, one fully loaded Krasnogorsk 3.